Hello, folks. It is June 12th. We're here with John Robb today, and we're here with Joshua Lisec. Now, this is going live on all three of our Twitter streams. So, some quick introductions. Joshua Lisec is a ghostwriter, a hypnotist, author, or ghost author of over 80 books. His forthcoming book, So Good They Call You a Fake, has to do with how to build authority. And then we have John Robb, which is, who are you, John? Warfare strategist, author, the guy, the statue who's doing this about the future, and many other things besides. And then there's me, Brian Keith, the guy who hosts these kind of things sometimes. And we're talking today about all kinds of stuff, but specifically around authority and AI, and how do you have credibility, or how can you tell what credibility looks like in a world in which every day there's more and more AI stuff showing up. I forgot one thing. Joshua also has an app that is an AI / credibility / hypnosis tool, which is pertinent to the people trying to tell us what authority looks like. So let's start off with you, Joshua. Can you tell us a bit about your AI tool, and then we'll go from there to John and how he perceives that.
Yes. So the tool is called Word Out, and I've developed it with a mutual of ours named Michael Gimmerin. And one of the strongest use cases that we're seeing for it is with authors specifically. So that's where it all kind of comes together. It is said for authors that you should spend 20% of your time writing your content and 80% of your time promoting it. Well, that's difficult when you're dedicated to greatness in your craft. You spend 100% of your time writing it. And then, of course, given percentages, there's not much time, or at least the perception of not much time and energy left to promote it. It feels like by publishing this thing, I've done the hard part. I'm done now. Well, that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning. And the idea is with Word Out is people are uploading. So like what I do is I can upload an audiobook chapter from the book, or I can copy and paste chapter of the book and then transform the content into social media posts that I can then schedule and deploy across all the different platforms as threads, as short articles, as little snippets, 1-2 sentence tweets. And it takes a process that normally takes hours and makes it a few minutes. And the key is it doesn't take that Chat GPT feminine corporate voice with adverbs and exclamation points everywhere, which is really annoying. It doesn't do that. It takes the verbatim and it just either summarizes it or it expands it into something that's more appropriate. So it's the idea is to get the word out about your book, about your product, about your services.
So here's the thing, John, we were discussing, John's dogs are misbehaving. The thing that we were discussing, John, on the podcast this week inside the Global Girls Workspace was what happens, and I guess we were by email too, what happens when all of people's content has been eaten by AI to go generate content like what Josh was talking about. And how does that relate? We talked about one of my businesses where if an AI, let's say in my case, a big bank could use the AI, eat all my training processes, and then they could just replicate it, and suddenly my business goes poof. How does what Josh was talking about with this app relate to what we were talking about?
Well, in general, I mean, AI is great as a creativity tool. It can give you ideas as to what you should be focusing on, and it can personalize it. It can take what you've done before and project what you'll say in the future. It's also great at automating. I mean, what you're writing. I mean, I can put in my content into ChatGPT, and then it would write a post for me on a topic. But it's kind of clunky that way, and Joshua's getting ahead of that. He's automating that kind of process to get your content out in an automated and friendly way, if I've understood it correctly. And so that's definitely something that anyone publishing can benefit from.
So here's the question. What does it mean in terms of my ability as a consumer to understand what is true? I'm imagining we can now have a VA who barely speaks English, and until Word Out, they could use ChatGPT and they could create huge amounts of mediocre content. And now there's apps that do things like take Joshua the hypnotist ghostwriter's brain and put it in the hands of the barely lingual or the barely English speaking VA. And then that person can then get hired out to, say, any political candidate to take a transcript of their speech, and they can create vast amounts of content that is not what that candidate said, but that is, SEO keywords or whatever else. So what is this doing to my ability to know what is true?
Yeah, it makes it more difficult, obviously. And, it's part and parcel for the entire environment. It's not only that what AI is doing, it's what, online tribalism is doing in terms of undermining your ability to determine truth from fiction, and your willingness to pick truth over fiction. This kind of tool is definitely a productivity tool, that it makes it easier for you to do more, but that just raises the bar, and you just have to do better. And combining different types of acumen into a cohesive whole, and then refining it, and then checking it for errors and the like is going to be something that distinguishes something that's good versus bad. But that doesn't determine whether or not, that's not factoring in whether it's truth or not, but it just, in terms of the quality of the content.
How close are we, Joshua, to me taking a tool like WordOut, having it eat your entire Twitter feed and every interview you've ever done, and write the book that you're just releasing?
WordOut is not designed for that sort of thing. It is a content repurposer, transformer, and schedule with automating as much of that as possible to take a multi-hour process and making it a 5 to 10 minute process. So it's not a creativity tool. I think John has the right framing. It's a productivity tool. And that's what we're seeing with the most effective AI tools that people are using, and the people who are using them the most for the best. It's productivity rather than creativity, because the human is still doing the creativity, and the human is the judge whether or not this is good content or not good content. And the idea is WordOut is to make the good better and to make the better best, rather than to bring someone who doesn't know what they're doing and make them excellent. Now, let's say a VA from the developing world had access to WordOut. They could simply upload and schedule for publishing, upload, transform, and schedule for publishing. But their output will not be as great as somebody who has competence in copy editing. Someone who's a direct response copywriter might be able to charge $5,000 a month to their clients to spend a few minutes a week using WordOut, versus the creative agency in Southeast Asia who charges $500 a month for the same thing. The difference in output is noticeable. There's probably going to be a point in the number of, I would say years, but more likely a number of months, where what you've just described of taking a timeline, uploading a CSV file of someone's tweet, and then creating a book out of it. But the problem is, from my perspective, what we're seeing AI capable of doing is working with what exists. And yes, there are some really interesting hallucinations, but the invention of facts is a problem, where you say, give me 10 famous quotes on X, and 9 of the 10 were never actually spoken in the real world. Some people are seeing those issues happening. And there's been a number of, let's say, quality assurance issues with legal professionals using ChatGPT and it turning out giving lies and just like making stuff up. Same with students. But at least at this stage right now, it's speeding up. I think the term might be, in terms of timing, shortening the OODA loops. So it's a great OODA loop shortener, if I'm using the term correctly, for the people who are good at using these tools. But that already required having a talent stack of creativity, copywriting, the basics. So it's going to make the best even better, and but both it lowers the standard of who can use these tools, but it also raises the bar of greatness, so that the great can become even better, whereas the terrible will become less terrible.
Or more terrible at volume. Right?
Yeah,
Right.
Yes,
they're magnified terribleness. Yeah, what's surprising to me is this: like, big LLMs are able to produce search-like results just based on how they're built. I mean, they built a meta model of all language and how it's used in all these different contexts, because we've read all these different conversations and all these different papers and all these different things. And it can still produce relatively good search results, or summary results on topics that it has limited knowledge of, but based on this meta model, it's not actually storing all this specific data. And I think what we're going to see relatively soon is just that they're going to start adding an entire corpus of very specific knowledge, whether it's in medicine or whether it's in engineering or programming. And this is all verified data, supposedly, that works in practice, and then restricting the language model to working on that data. Or in terms of search results, here's a list of papers that actually exist. You can't list a paper unless it exists in this stack. And that gets rid of all, most of, if not all, the hallucinations really, really quickly by restricting it to that corpus. We're basically talking to, when we're talking to ChatGPT or any LLM, a very smart neural network that's read everything, but doesn't actually remember anything in detail. Knows enough that it could probably, get through almost any conversation on almost anything that has been exposed to. That's great as a productivity tool, like you're talking about. Taking a book and then having it read the book and then apply the book to emerging news, so you can, anytime something happens, it's applying it. Or anytime it runs across something, it applies it. So that could be fantastic in getting that word out. Like you said, once you write the book and you get this big thing out of your head onto the page, and you don't want to touch it again, almost, it's like, it's like you've held this crystalline structure in your head and it's like starting to fall apart, once you've gotten it out, and, promoting it almost hurts, and you almost want to go on to the next thing.
Well, notably, you've written one book, and that was in what, 06, 05?
Yeah, 06, 07.
And every few years I say, so when's your next book? And you're like, go away. I'm busy.
Well, no, it's just the topic is changing so quickly, and I had to write it in report format just to keep up with it. And so if I wrote a book, a lot of people would like it, but I should write a book. I have enough
but you don't.
And ideas. Yeah, I know, but I don't. It's just
it has to do with, and this gets to our next topic of authority. It has to do with you get your recognition for being an authority. You have your Substack, you have your Patreon. So for 10 or 15 bucks a month, whatever it is, people can, at a very low price point, access your brain a little bit. They have the workspace thing. You put out 1 or 2 reports a month. You do podcasts, and they don't have to read a whole book to get like, oh, I get to go hang out with John Robb and pick his brain a little bit.
Right.
But we're also, so right now, it's sort of like you say that Twitter could only have been built when it was built, and it cannot be built today because the universe is different. John Robb, the egregore of John Robb, who is an authority, was built at a certain time, and it exists now, but it has had a certain duration. But if someone wants to become an authority today, it doesn't matter what they did, because today's the world of AI. And if you can't point to what you did last decade, more and more it's going to be, well, is this just fake, or is this person actually an authority?
Yeah, that's true. And it's also tough because of the tribalized environment. So much easier to be a member of one or the other tribes, and trying to cut, work with the truth, or trying to figure out how things work, usually puts you in the center and then puts you in the crosshairs of either tribe. So if you say one thing, just a little off, or it's interpreted, I've said things and then had both sides, both major tribes hit me, one being the, dissident, no alignment, no standards, except, what we determined locally. And then the other one is like one standard for everybody, this alignment. That's what I'm writing right now, is this like alignment cascade we're going through right now. It's happening really, really quickly. And it's hard to be an independent authority on anything now. You have to be one side or the other. And, people won't actually look at your stuff as true unless you conform to the patterns of their, network.
What do you think?
What do you think about that? Yeah, critique me on that, please.
So I have an interesting perspective that I think it aligns with and also expands on.
Sure.
So in the as a ghostwriter and in the publishing industry, we see the publishing industry lagging ridiculously behind on what is known fundamentally now. It seems like everybody knows from a digital marketing perspective. So there's a hilarious anecdote, semi-hilarious. It's more funny than sad, but also more sad than funny, depending on your perspective. In the book that I share, in So Good They Call You a Fake, about I taught a traditional publishing house. I taught their team about search engine optimization. Like, you can research keywords relating to topics in the book and alter the title, subtitle, and chapter topics and titles based on what people are searching in real time, and you can even see how many per month. They were shocked. Where did you get this information? How do you know this? This was in 2020 that this conversation happened.
Right.
That's how far the institutions are behind. The institutions will produce a book for as broad a market as possible because they have no idea which niche is going to resonate. So they have it be for everyone. And that's how we get this bizarre scenario where someone will say, my book is for freelancers. It's also for people who have a side hustle. It's also for single moms. It's also for CEOs. It's also for high performance athletes. This is how books are marketed in the general trade nonfiction space. They have no idea which is going to be a hit. So they optimize for, well, who's going to sell the most books regardless of who it is? Well, celebrities. Okay, so they spend 90% of their time, attention, and effort on books that are going to sell regardless of the quality. And same thing with politicians. They know that the way that these deals are done, thousands of books are going to be purchased, wink, wink, by a politician. And of course, the politician often doesn't know what's in their own book, because the typical way of ghostwriting a book is a ghostwriter might meet with a statesman or stateswoman maybe twice, 4 hours max. And then they're going to go grab what's on Wikipedia or what they said in speeches, and they're going to recompile it, add some stuff and some filler, and invent whole fiction. And this is why when politicians are interviewed about their book, they give tells of not knowing what's in their own book, which is, of course, hilarious. But the institution's perspective is that it's all true, right? Even though perhaps a certain percentage of it, which is non-zero, never happened, is not even close to happening, is not even believable that it happened. Entire conversations, entire individuals are invented. And this is usually why novelist ghostwriters are employed for nonfiction pieces. And that's the aspect of the Prince Harry the Spare book. The ghostwriter is a novelist. So that's a little wink, wink, nod, nod from that perspective.
And it's not really worth it for anyone to push back against it, right? I mean, within the industry, no one wants to push back because then their book would be pushed back against it. Anyone on the outside, unless they're a target for some other reason, there really isn't any upside to it.
Yeah.
Saying,
and the institution is something that Michael Gimron always talks about, is the consensus of institutions. So it seems like the literary agencies and the publishing houses and the marketers and the press, who are all fawning and giving positive critical reviews of this or that book, everybody agrees it's true. And so this is an authority from the institution's perspective. Whereas independently published authors, it's the Wild West. And there are people who are churning out 10 books a week using ChatGPT. And of those 10, one of them sells one copy and the rest are zero. So we talk about, AI creating an opportunity for quantity of more poor quality. Yeah, that's definitely happening. But there are people who are bringing their own audiences. And Brian, you and I talked with the author of The Pathless Path, a great book on there, of how he bucked the industry and has sold 25,000 copies of his book. And the publishers came to him, hey, can we buy your book from you? And Paul said, nope, I'm not doing that. That's a terrible deal. So there comes a point where the institutions need you more than you need them. And that's the ideal place to be. Right. And then you're at that point where if they're coming to you, you have enough marketing savvy and you have an audience already built in on your social networking, and you have a message that resonates, and you really don't need them, because all they'll do is market for you, but you can do it better than they can, right? Yes. They'll give you some money up front, but it's like you're going to make that anyway on the backside, and probably a lot more. So it's usually almost never worth it once you've had to reach a certain level. Yes, and especially since traditional publishers don't want you unless you have minimum 200,000 followers on at least 2 platforms combined. So there's an author I work with who's in the process of traditional publishing, almost 100,000 followers on one social network, literary agent. Okay, heard back from publishers. Okay, they want to publish this book. but they need to see 100,000 followers minimum on another platform, and then you'll get the deal. And it's like quality of the book. I mean, obviously I wrote it, so it's excellent, but that wasn't even part of the conversation. It's all about volume. It's all about size.
Right.
It's de-risking, because the idea is they want the author to sell the book. They're not going to do any marketing of the book. The author's going to go on podcasts, the same podcasts, whether independently or traditionally published or not, because the book is that interesting and the audience size is that big. So what someone should do to become traditionally published is the same thing that they should do if they're going to be independently published, which is grow your own audience, build clout as an authority in which your claims and your results are aligned. If you are a public figure who is institutional credibility, you don't need results. You just need claims. And then the institutions can claim this. Look at this real book from this real author. It's so amazing. And look at all the reviews it's getting. Even though the casual reader will not be able to tell that a certain non-zero percentage of it is invented, wholesale invented. And because they're an institution, they're relatively immune to yahoos like me who come out and point, guys, this is 100% inauthentic. What does this guy know? He's a nobody. He's just an individual. And then, like I saw when the Mary Sue thread back in December went viral, we had a number of what looked to be bots attacking me with the exact same insult verbatim, one after the other, within seconds of one another, dozens of them. I think you call that the network storm, John. I experienced that in December because I was insulting the IP of Disney, and they came after me for that.
Yeah. That's that tribalism in action. You know, you're a failure to align, right? If you're not aligning, you have to be attacked. It's like that. It's whack-a-mole, but with lots and lots of bots. We had that a lot more with the Ukraine war too, early on last year, until they nerfed it, or Elon nerfed it. It happens a little bit now, but it happens in a delayed fashion. So the post usually gets some prominence before it gets whacked. So determining truth in a world of tribalization or network tribalization and automated content. It's going to be tough. It's not to say that automated content is necessarily going to be untrue or lead you astray. It's just, I mean, if the difference, I guess, as a productivity tool, often you have the people who are really good at it get so much better, and the line just gets like, it's like, when a body approaches a black hole, the differences in the gravity between your feet and your head relative to the black hole stretches out the whole body into a stream of molecules. It's like, it's that kind of thing happens with technology too. So people who are really good get accelerated faster and leaving more and more people behind, producing volumes of crud that never gets seen. We get increasingly good at filtering it out, and never see it. The system adapts. It's going to constantly adapt to try to filter that stuff out. Yeah. So what to do? How do you figure out something that's true or not? You have any heuristics for that?
Something that I have found useful is, as a ghostwriter, learning what tells for true credibility are versus what are pseudo tells. And one major red flag and or green light, depending on your perspective, is who is accusing who of being a fake. And that's the topic of my book, So Good They Call You a Fake, advertisement. Right. If an institution and their minions are coming after you, calling you a fraud, they're calling you a fake, they are trying to discredit you, they're dismantling your image,
right?
That is a tell to the general public this person is the real deal. They are over the target. And so they will slap some cartoonishly fake appearance on you, or accusation like me. I am the credibly accused misogynist and male chauvinist ghostwriter who is allegedly ghostwritten for real authors. This is what's said about me in the press. That is a tell for this person being the real deal.
Right.
No one is attacked if they're not significant. by the institution. The network storm, as you call it, John, it only goes after people who are important enough to be attacked. And at the same time, if via in most cases, if the community notes, the individuals, the collective of individuals are pointing out that the institution is fake or a message is inauthentic or something like that, whether it's on vaccines or masking or the real reasons for the Ukrainian war or what have you, if the collective of the individuals are aligning in opposition to the institution, the individuals in this collective, who each has a minority report, as Michael Gimmerin would call them, they tend to be on to something. And it's the institution who is usually in error. But so it's a reversal of that. And I liken what the Dilbert creator Scott Adams talks about in law, where individuals are innocent until proven guilty, but institutions are guilty until proven innocent because of the power, the secrecy, the resources, and other things that they have. And I find that maps well onto authenticity versus inauthenticity. Institutions have every reason to deceive in mass via the consensus control mechanisms, forced consensus, flags in bios, pronouns in the bio, this or that hashtag. Whereas individuals who are saying, oh, wait a second, this isn't right, this isn't working out, there tends to be a there. It's not 100% of the time, but it's usually a hard and fast rule to give the TLDR. If the individuals collectively are pointing out the institution saying this is fake, it is an authentic fake.
Or at least worth listening to, so you can make your own evaluation.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple layers here. As we started to see a kind of a breakdown in social discourse and the tribalization in warring camps, is that we saw a layer where people wouldn't accept the facts that were presented from the other side.
Yes.
Okay, they saw them as outside the tribe and therefore enemies, and anything they observed and reported to the group was biased and designed to harm them. So they would say, that's a fake, or that's part of this conspiracy, or that's due to horrible motives, or horrible takes. They're just trying to promote this fact, or they would just ignore it like it didn't exist. And then there's this upper layer, which is this conjugation scape. This is like how everything is spun and put into a pattern. How do you interpret this fact? And when there's not a dispute over the facts, since everybody's covering it, then it's like whose spin is true, and then you get the wars. So you put out a take on something, sometimes through the conjugation, what kind of words you use to describe it, and then you get some pushback initially, and there's like a searching mechanism as the tribal network that's against you starts to go through different ways of attacking you, if you're prominent enough to warrant that. And then as soon as they solidify on something, then it's like boom, boom, boom. They'll repeat that, something that works. And when you see that kind of critique and that kind of pushback, you have to know it's not real in a true sense. It's the best one that they could come up with to push back against it. Most of what people consider disinformation really isn't a dispute over facts, or it's really over interpretation or spin. You've interpreted that fact wrong. You've interpreted that fact in a negative way or a positive way, and that shouldn't be. That's not allowed.
I have a thought experiment.
Yep.
Here's the thought experiment for all the folks watching. Of the 3 people on this live stream, we have 1 vegan, 1 carnivore, and 1 somewhere in the middle. As you're watching this, think about, for each of us, if we were the vegan or the carnivore or the somewhere in the middle, how that would impact your view of the credibility of the person speaking. We're not going to say who's who right now, but just think about it. Do you feel differently if you think about, oh, Joshua's a vegan, or oh, Joshua's a carnivore, or maybe it's, hey, Joshua's a vegan, or Joshua's a carnivore, or maybe Joshua's in the middle and John Robb's the carnivore and I'm the vegan. How does that change how you feel?
Diet is a tribal strategy. Yep. I've noticed, and something else that is fun and interesting is in the pursuit of followings online, people have noticed that attention is influence, as Mike Kernovich always says. And so if someone wants to have influence online, what they will often do is credibility launder. So I see this a lot in this space, fitness, health, wellness, and whatnot, where someone will have a particular transformation, physical transformation. Either it's lots of weight loss, inches lost, muscle gain, for example, and they will use white lies to write a testimonial of their own experiences, like share their story to try to create a viral thread with a before and after picture. And so look at all these things that I started doing and look at the things that I stopped doing. Of course, there's obvious lies of omission here. And then they will ensure that they're using keywords that resonate within this particular space. And then they will often tag large accounts that are in that and say, thank you for the advice I got from this person. But there's not really any way to determine or to point out that what's in this person's story is deceitful, because it resonates as truth within the tribe. It's like a tribal truth. So of course, eating this way created this transformation. It's what happens for people like us. And minority reports within that tribe are suppressed or explained away as being, oh well, that's just genetics, or you're an outlier, because there's that truth that we have the one and only way to do things can create an almost I won't say cult-like, but something that might be perceived as being cult-like, where oh well, you're just not doing it right. Eating that's not working out for you. Well, you're not eating enough of it. You see that a lot in a particular space.
That's true with tribes in general. Is that something that's positive or some goal, specific, is that that varies a lot within the tribe. So for instance, on the left, if you said, what is justice, there'd be like a million different answers. And then anyone who actually describes it in any degree of detail would be attacked by all sorts of other folks. And on the right, if you picked any position in terms of what kind of society you want to pick or want to build, you're going to be attacked from all these different positions, undermining your credibility, or but unless you're focused on trying to do it in a very, very small niche, and then you can probably get away with it. And even then it's hard, like diet, right? I see that as a good sized niche, but it's still a niche. And even when you're preaching to the choir within that group, you're still going to get people sniping you. One thing that doesn't seem to lose momentum is critiques, or targeting the bad person, targeting the negative, because these tribes seem to give you leeway in describing how bad that person is, or how bad their acts are, and how many evil things they've done, and that tends to resonate. And the people who are good at that, tend to do really well. They can't describe, of course, they don't. Whenever they try to describe what they actually want to achieve, then they're going to get slammed. But if they're just attacking that common enemy, they'll get a lot of flow.
And so they tend to become tribal leaders, the people who are best at ad hominem attacks on the other tribe.
Oh, they're definitely they're the top. I mean, those are the million plus 2 million person accounts on Twitter.
Yes.
And they get a lot of flow. It's hard. It's not like an easy solution to be that kind of person. You have to be really good at it. And there's different ways to do it and different ways to approach it. But you tend to get less pushback whenever they deviate and try to tell you what to do, what's good, and everything. How you should live your life. Then they're usually attacked pretty soundly.
Unless their advice is do the opposite of what the enemy is doing, and look at all the fun pictures of what happens when you do the opposite of what they're doing. Or they're very vague. They're particularly vague with their advice, would you say?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Anything specific tends to get dinged.
So that it sounds like maybe the decentralized networks and the tribes, which are perhaps have a similar problem with institutions and the focus on consensus over truth. It's like tribalism over truth as well. And so even the decentralized networks and who the leaders that ascend within them are those who are best at making ad hominem attacks. That doesn't necessarily get you closer to truth any better or worse than the institution. Is that fair to say?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's actually probably worse than a bureaucratic institution. I mean, at least a bureaucracy before it's been aligned has some variance. It's more process than outlook. And in a tribalized environment, and tribalization is upstream of determining the facts or truth formation, and then how to interpret the world that's beyond that. It distorts everything. It's like this funhouse mirror on the world, and there's a certain dynamism in how it adapts and moves forward, so it doesn't like get too out of alignment too quickly with reality. But over time, it's definitely going to deviate from reality in horrible ways, and it tends to intensify, become more adamant, more extreme in its focus, and unwilling to accept anything that's not in alignment with its view on the world. And that's it makes this kind of network alignment more dangerous than any kind of bureaucratic incompetence over time.
What's the solution then for the individual who wants to know what's true or what's more likely to be true, if we're between institutional truth that's 15 or 20 years behind the times, and then there's the tribes that resonate with what is most focused at attacking the enemy?
Yeah, I mean, what's your goal here? I mean, determining truth, how does it benefit you? Sometimes trying to figure out exactly what happened in a given incident tends to be, it could be an incredible waste of time and put you at odds with all sorts of people that you didn't really it's not even worth the fight to engage in, unless that's your job and that's what you do.
And is that your job and that's what you do, determining what happened?
I'm trying to figure out less what every single event is at core, more focused on the process. The stuff, the frameworks and things I build are way ahead of what we're going to eventually try to hopefully discover through behavioral science and just munging through it with book after book after book of people exploring the space. But because things are moving so quickly now, and then things that we just learned are being mutated by the new technologies that are coming. So
I think you are not just a painter, you are the person looking at the tools the painters are using, and you're trying to describe the tools they're using. That's what I think you do, John.
Yeah, I mean, that's explain the techniques and the processes and the structure of things such that you can figure out how they're going to evolve in the future and how they're going to impact how we think and how we organize our lives and our societies.
Now, the other side of that is, Joshua, what you're doing is you're doing the same thing, but for the subset of people who are describing themselves as authorities. Instead of painting, you're showing us the tools they're using so that we can understand better. How is it, why do we consider the people we consider to be authorities, and are we making a good judgment or are we being conned? That's what I feel like you're doing.
Yeah, and there's something else I want to ask about real quick, John, which is
Sure.
People who subscribe to your Substack, what job are they looking to get done? What are they looking to do? If it's not find out what really happened, what is it they're looking to? Brian was talking about the idea of this process and learning about what's the mechanics of figuring out what happened. I'm just curious from why do people pay you to subscribe to your report?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is to find out what happened, but to kind of peel away the layer on top to see how it's all working underneath it. How you got to this situation you're in right now, and how it's going to evolve and how it's going to transform. Most other people focus on the specifics of the event, right? They go through this kind of entire investigation and go down, and they kind of hand wave maybe at this larger social historical trend that's occurring or whatever. I'm trying to find the mechanism. So it's like you have this reality that's presented to you, and you strip away the covering layer, and you can look at it. And I mean, it can be depressing at times. So it's like, the old Nietzsche thing, right? Stare into the abyss kind of thing. But
There's something else you do though. You
Yeah.
create an intentionally non-tribal space, which in the comments in your workspaces, time and time again, so we'll have this Google Doc where everyone is sharing their thoughts and reflection of what you're sharing, and off and on, someone will make some comment that is tribalistic. Its tribal content is 95%, and its useful content is 5%, and then everybody else dog piles and smacks them down for being overly tribal. So it's like we're paying to be in a club where there will be people who are tribally different from you, but perceive there to be value in trying to understand the truth together. And those kind of spaces, I don't know that I know of a single other one other than your community.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, that makes it self-limiting too. So it's not riding these big tribal waves. And it probably skews a little bit more towards the dissent side, because the very nature of the thing is that because you're not a believer in this, big alignment side on the left, it tends to move towards the right, towards dissent, but not fully into dissent at all costs and everything. So it's, just by nature of disagreeing with the way things are interpreted or being presented, puts you at odds.
And so what it seems like people are doing as a solution to being at odds is to be at odds with all tribes in one way, and perhaps in alignment with all tribes in other ways. It's almost a sort of a subscribe to your own reality, maybe a buffet style, constructing your worldview of like, well, I resonate with this truth of this tribe. I resonate with the values of this tribe in this way, even if the values of the second tribe are fundamentally opposed to the first tribe. It's a subscribe. It kind of choose which different tribe you want to be a part of based on what outcomes you want to create in your life. And it seems like perhaps the best thing to do is to be mindful of that is what's happening, because there's not any reason, it seems like, for an individual thinking person to 100% subscribe to every single literal belief or exact precise value held within a single tribe, unless that's already 100% you. Otherwise, you would be inauthentic, and there'd be integrity called into question if you're a card-carrying member of a certain group and you don't hold to what that group does. Perhaps this is just thinking out loud, but it seems like this sort of choose one tribal truth from different tribes after another is what a lot of people are doing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, I started noting that way back. Early on, I was looking at different, how people dealt with criminal groups and different, tribal guerrilla groups in some African conflicts. And they were, switching between these different groups by the day, depending on who was paying. So you'd be attacking this thing on Tuesday, and on Wednesday you'd be attacking this, and you keep on switching, based on economic and historical drivers. So it's funny to see that kind of fluidity occur here. The right has being more on the dissident side is more against stopping wholesale alignment, and then the left seems to be focusing on everyone align on the same enemies. And there is some division on the left on certain things, but it's particularly when they try to define what they're actually for, and that's when things fall apart. Is as long as they're focused on suppression and coercion into this alignment, they seem to be good and relatively cohesive. And then the right is like, you could switch between all these different ways of it, and depending on the issues that are important to you, stopping and dissenting and saying, no, this doesn't work. It's very mobile. It's very, maneuver warfare. Yeah. It's, often, you throw out feints and bombs and try to disrupt what the psychological processes of the people actually, advancing whatever thing that they're pushing forward. And it's a little more chaotic. I kind of think of it more as a horde, all these different like individual groups, and they don't, it's a very, very decentralized version of this open source insurgency. And the other one is an open source insurgency is animated by this common enemy.
So does that mean that the right is like is permanently in playing the role of the quote unquote opposition party, or the opposition, the enemy, the resistance, and must be treated as such?
Oh yeah, 100%. It's all about stopping network centralization, stopping this network from consolidating. I mean, the problem with networks in general is that it's going to try to consolidate and make the same, and forcing everything into alignment. And now, you're talking about alignment in AI. Everything's got to be the same, and it's the ever expanding thing. I mean, it's little wonder, and I, did this in the Senate testimony too. It's like our conflict with China and Russia. I was talking that before we even had this formalization of this conflict, is that we're in a network war. Okay, and China and Russia were the only two places where there was relative. I mean, there were social networks that were separate from everything else, and it was inevitable that we would try to consolidate and move into that space too, and force them to align with us. And if they didn't align and didn't connect, there would be conflict. And so you could see it also in the kind of intolerance of this kind of extreme anger against Russia. It's like they're not just bad; they're ultimate evil, and all the Russians are evil, and everything they do is evil, and their whole network, everything they think about is evil. And we're doing the same thing increasing with China. I mean, granted, there are definitely some terrible things going on in China, but the way we're thinking about it is this network expansion. So I mean, trying to the right is more to stop that network from expanding and consolidating and creating what I call the long night. This narrow orthodoxy of thought and behavior that's forced on everybody, and it's enforced by AI and this massive surveillance and control system that we're building in the private sector. I mean, control system that far exceeds anything we've ever seen in history. I mean, it makes Stalin and everyone else just kind of green with envy. They could never imagine something so. Even 1984 in the description of the book is like it's so far beyond that. It's nuts.
This conversation could go on in that vein for a very long time, folks, and it does over on John Robb Substack, where there is 1 or 2 reports every month. There's a Google Doc that we work through. There's private podcasts inside the group every month. And then there's also John's book, if you've not read that. If you liked what Joshua here had to say, his new book coming out in just a week, less than a week. Oh my goodness, it's only a few days away. Is So Good They Call You Fake, comes out shortly. There's a bunch of bonuses if you get that book before the big time when it goes live. There's also Joshua's tool Word Out app that does your persuasive copywriting for you. If you like these kind of live streams, you can find a bunch more of my content at redbeard.tv or my podcast at redbeard.am. Joshua, would you give us the last word on authority?
Yes, it seems like, and I might be, I'm not sure who I'm borrowing this from. It might be you, John. It might be our mutual Michael Gimmerin. But the idea that promises and results being in alignment, what the person promises, the person actually is able to produce, either for themselves and others. It's the opposite of the obese doctor. So like the fit doctor, that's probably an authority. What they're claiming, and if they're able to produce from multiple populations, multiple races, multiple ages, both men and women, older and younger, if that individual is able to produce by following their claims particular outcomes that are enviable and that are authentic, that person is the authority. That's what I like to ghostwrite for, by the way, and that's the topic of my book, and a reframe on what being called a fake means. It's the idea that when institutions and their minions are attacking you and calling you a fake, saying there's no way this person is legit, that person's probably the real deal. They're probably an authority.
So this is geared towards somebody who's trying to develop authority and credibility in this chaotic space.
Yes. I mean, the key is that they must already be good at what they do. Correct. They must actually be an expert, but like, how do I get noticed online? Like the people who are at the top of my industry are grifters and scammers, and I'm actually good at what I do, and yet no one's paying attention to me. Why? How do I get attention? That's the person it's for.
Okay, folks, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, John.